Something just changed in the Atlantic. For most of this hurricane season, the tropics have been quiet, almost shockingly quiet. But right now, as we sit here on August 20th, bigger and stronger tropical waves are rolling off the coast of Africa. And some of the forecast models are starting to wake up and pay attention. The next storm name on the list is Dolly. And the question every single person in the Caribbean, in Florida, along the Gulf Coast needs to be asking right now is the long quiet about to end? Because here's the truth. We are heading into the single most dangerous stretch of the entire hurricane season, the peak, the statistical bullseye. And for the first time all season, the models are hinting that something might be trying to organize. Let's break down everything happening right now, what the waves look like, where the threats are, and what to watch carefully over the next 7 to 10 days. Let's start with a full picture of what this 2026 Atlantic hurricane season has looked like so far, because you need that context to understand why what's happening right now matters so much. This season has been extraordinarily quiet. 2 named storms total, Arthur and Bertha, both formed earlier in the summer, and neither one reached hurricane strength. That's it. For comparison, the long-term average, based on weather records going back decades, calls FOAR roughly 14 named storms in a full season, with about 7 becoming hurricanes, including 3 major hurricanes. We are nowhere near that pace. The accumulated cyclone energy of the season, a measurement meteorologists call ACE, essentially a running total of how much energy tropical systems have generated, is running about 75% below the historical average. 75% below. That's not just quiet, that's historically slow. The reason comes down to something called El Niño. El Niño is a natural climate pattern where water temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean run warmer than normal. When that happens, it reshapes the entire atmosphere above the Atlantic. It strengthens upper-level winds over the basin, and those stronger winds create what meteorologists call wind shear, the change in wind speed and direction with altitude. Wind shear is a hurricane's worst enemy. When you have strong wind shear in the atmosphere, it literally tears developing storm systems apart before they can organize and strengthen. And right now, El Niño isn't just present. It's intensifying. NOAA has put the odds of a strong or very strong El Niño during August, September, and October at 90%. That's a 90% chance that the single biggest season-suppressing force on the planet is going to be at its St. Wrongest, exactly when the Atlantic would normally be most active. This is why Colorado State University, one of the most respected seasonal hurricane forecasting centers in the world, has called for a well below normal season and has lower. Its forecast twice already. This is why NOAA is giving a 75% chance of a below normal season, up from 55% earlier in the summer. Every single strong El Niño event since 1950 has been associated with a below normal Atlantic hurricane season. Every single one. The data is clear. But here's what every coastal resident, every person in the Caribbean, every island community needs to hear right now. Below normal does not mean zero. Below normal does not mean safe. It takes only one storm making landfall to make your season the worst season of your life. Only one. And here we are, right at the doorstep of peak season, and for the first time all summer, the bigger tropical waves are arriving. The sleeper is starting to stir. Now, let's talk about the Saharan dust, because this is the other major factor that's been strangling the Atlantic tropics all summer long. Saharan dust is exactly what it sounds like. Massive amounts of dry, dusty air that blow off the African continent and get swept westward over the Atlantic Ocean. When that dust settles into the atmosphere over the ocean, it does 2 things that are devastating for tropical development. First, it creates what's called the Saharan air layer, a dry, stable mass of air that sits in the middle levels of the atmosphere, right where tropical storms need moisture to grow. NOAA research shows that the air inside a Saharan dust plume contains roughly 50% less moisture than normal tropical air, 50% drier. That's like trying to light a campfire with soaking wet wood. The thunderstorm activity that seeds tropical systems gets choked off before it can even start. Second, the dust reflects sunlight, which can slightly cool the ocean surface, removing another ingredient that storms need. Throughout June, July, and the first half of August, this dust has been relentless. Wave after wave of Saharan dust has crossed the Atlantic, and one after another, the tropical waves trying to develop have run into this wall of dry air and fallen apart. If you follow the tropics, you've watched it happen. A wave exits Africa looking promising. The models light up briefly, and then it hits the dust, it hits the shear, and it dies. Over and over again. That's been the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season so far. But something is shifting. Saharan dust outbreaks don't last forever. Meteorologists who track these patterns know the dust tends to become less dominant as we move deeper into August and into September. The peak of the Atlantic hurricane season, climatologically, falls around September 10th, the single most active date in the entire calendar statistically. We're now approaching that window, and right on cue, bigger and stronger tropical waves are moving off the coast of Africa. Here's exactly what we're tracking as of August 20th. There are multiple tropical waves in motion today. One is already moving through the eastern Caribbean, bringing scattered showers to areas including Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, and Martinique. That particular wave is not expected to develop into anything organized, but the real attention isn't on that one. It's on what's coming behind it. There are stronger tropical waves now moving off the coast of Africa into the main development region. The main development region is the stretch of a tropical Atlantic between the African coast and the Caribbean, roughly between 10 and 20 degrees north latitude, where the ocean is warm, where conditions can become favorable, and where Cape Verde-type hurricanes with the long-tracking, powerful storms that can cross the entire Atlantic are born. The waves now exiting Africa are stronger than anything we've seen move into that region all season. And for the first time all summer, a couple of forecast models are actually trying to develop one of these into a tropical system. The European model, widely considered one of the best global weather models available, is developing a significant tropical wave into a tropical storm in the coming days, and eventually working it toward the west-northwest. Another model that meteorologists watch closely is also hinting at some development, with that same wave potentially reaching tropical depression or tropical storm intensity roughly 9 to 10 days from now, again moving west-northwest. Meanwhile, the American GFS model, the Canadian model, and the German ICON model are not going along with that development. They're keeping these waves as strong tropical waves, but not organizing them into anything more. So there's a genuine disagreement among the models right now. That disagreement itself is important information. It tells you that conditions are not clearly hostile anymore. If development were completely impossible, all the models would agree it wasn't going to happen. The fact that some models are trying to spin something up tells you the door is cracking open. The main reason for the disagreement, as it has been all season, is dry air and dust. That dry air is still out ahead of these stronger tropical waves. Multiple models show a strong wave pushing westward and then weakening as it encounters the dry air ahead of it over the Atlantic and into Tihi Eastern Caribbean. You can watch it happen on the model runs. A wave exits Africa looking organized, moves west, and then kind of falls apart as it runs into that invisible wall of dryness. But the question is how long that dry air holds on, because we know that as we move deeper into the season, the dust tends to reduce and the moisture tends to increase across the Atlantic. If one of these stronger waves can make it through the dry air without completely falling apart, and if it finds a pocket of better conditions, the potential is there. Now let's talk about the Pacific side of this story, because it's equally important and not enough people are paying attention to it. The Eastern Pacific has been the exact opposite of the Atlantic this season. While the Atlantic has been suppressed by El Niño, the Pacific has been running above its historical average for activity because El Niño actually enhances Pacific hurricane development. Already this season, the Pacific has produced some serious storms. Hurricane Fausto, which formed back in late July, became the first hurricane of the season in either the Atlantic or Pacific. It peaked as a Category 2 storm with 105 km/h winds in the eastern Pacific. Before it began weakening AS, it moved toward the central Pacific. Even as it weakened, it threatened Hawaii, forcing forecasters to monitor it closely as it passed north of the islands. Central Pacific Hurricane Center issued advisories, and a high surf advisory was put in place for east-facing shores of Hawaii, with surf reaching as high as 15 feet. Fausto eventually became post-tropical, but not before producing rough and dangerous seas across a wide area. Then Genevieve came right behind it. Hurricane Genevieve rapidly intensified into a major storm and became the first Category 5 hurricane of the 2026 Eastern Pacific season, with maximum sustained winds well above 150 mph, reaching Category 5 status in late July while the Atlantic was sitting completely still. That's the El Niño signature in action. Suppressed Atlantic, enhanced Pacific. And right now, there's another system near Hawaii that forecasters are watching carefully. As of today, August 20th, a tropical system in the Central Pacific is being monitored, with the possibility it could bring some impacts to the Hawaiian Islands by the end of the weekend and into early next week. Most models keep the system to the south of the Big Island, but when you're talking about Hawaii, you watch these things closely no matter where the center tracks. The track matters, but so does the rainfall, the surf, and the coastal flooding potential, even from a system that just passes relatively close. For the United States mainland, Florida is looking at a better chance of scattered afternoon showers and storms over the next few days, with some 3-day rain totals potentially approaching 6 inches in parts of the state, where the rain trains repeatedly. That's something to watch because slow-moving showers and storms can produce localized flooding even without a tropical system involved. The Gulf Coast states, including Mississippi and Alabama, could also see a few showers. Parts of the mid-Atlantic, including Virginia and North Carolina, are looking at the possibility of 2 to 5 inches of rain over the next couple of days, with some severe weather potential today into tonight. New England is also seeing rain, with Cape Cod and surrounding areas looking at elevated rain trips, and says, especially heading into Saturday, that rain and moisture will then lift up toward Atlantic Canada by Sunday. Northern Colombia is seeing 40 to 50% rain chances. Parts of Venezuela, not under direct impact from recent earthquakes, could also see some passing showers. And the seas are running a bit rough from Jamaica south toward Colombia, with waves around 2 meters, roughly 6 to 7 feet, making for bumpier conditions in those passageways. Now let's come back to the big picture and go through exactly what to watch over the next 10 days and why it matters so much for where this goes from here. The next named storm will be Dolly, and Dolly could come from one of these stronger tropical waves now exiting Africa. If the European model or the other model that's hinting at development end up verifying, the timing would put a developing system roughly 1 to 1.5 weeks from now, potentially somewhere over the open Atlantic, working its way westward, potentially toward the Lesser Antilles and possibly the Caribbean. Here's why this matters beyond just one storm. The pattern we're entering right now is the critical window. August 20th through September 10th is climatologically the most dangerous stretch of the Atlantic hurricane season. This is when sea surface temperatures in the tropics are at their warmest of the year. This is when the African monsoon is still pumping out tropical waves with regularity. This is when, even in suppressed years like 2026, conditions can locally and temporarily become favorable enough for a wave that's just a little stronger and a little better organized than the rest to break through the shear, break through the dust, and spin up into something significant. History is full of examples. Seasons that looked dead in early August have gone on to produce a devastating late-season hurricane. 1992 was a quiet year overall. Hurricane Andrew still happened. The lesson has never changed. Quiet does not mean safe. It's worth sitting with that 1992 comparison for a moment because it's not just a throwaway historical footnote. It's structurally similar to what's happening this year. 1992 was itself an El Niño year. The basin was suppressed for most of the season. Forecasters were talking about how quiet things had been. And then in mid to late August, a single tropical wave came off Africa, found a narrow corridor of favorable conditions the broader pattern wasn't supposed to allow, and organized into what became Hurricane Andrew, a storm that went on to become one of the costliest hurricanes in U.S. history at the time, devastating South Florida. The overall seasonal statistics for 1992 still came in below average. The seasonal averages didn't matter at all to the people in Homestead, Florida. That's the exact dynamic worth keeping in mind right now. A suppressed season and a catastrophic individual storm are not contradictions. They can both be true in the same year because the basin-wide averages are describing the whole season, while any individual family only experiences the one storm that happens to find them. What makes these current, stronger waves different from everything we've seen earlier this summer? 2 things. First, the waves themselves are physically stronger. More organized tropical convection, more spin at low levels, more organized outflow at the upper levels. These are not the garden variety weak tropical waves that have been sliding through all summer without a second look. Second, we may be entering a brief window where the dust reduces just enough and the shear relaxes just slightly in some areas that one of these waves catches the right pocket of conditions and starts to organize. The European model sees it. Another closely watched model sees it to a lesser degree. The American model and others say not yet. That disagreement will resolve itself over the coming days as we get closer in time. The models become more reliable the closer you get to the actual event. So here's the plan. Watch the satellite imagery. Watch whether these waves maintain their organization as they cross the Atlantic, or whether the dry air chews them apart. Watch whether that dust layer starts to break down. Watch the sea surface temperatures in the central Atlantic as these waves approach. And watch the models, because they will start converging on an answer. If you live in the Caribbean, if you live in Florida, if you're anywhere in the potential path of whatever the Atlantic decides to produce over the next 2 weeks, use this quiet time wisely. The worst thing that can happen is not that a storm forms. The worst thing that can happen is that a storm forms, intensifies quickly, and you are not ready. Rapid intensification in the modern era, where sea surface temperatures are warm and El Niño can create very localized pockets of low shear, can take a storm from a minimal tropical storm to a dangerous hurricane in a matter of hours. To put a number on that, the official definition of rapid intensification is a storm's maximum sustained winds increasing by at least 35 miles per hour within a 24-hour period. That means a storm that's barely organized enough to have a name on a Tuesday morning can be a major, life-threatening hurricane by Wednesday morning without ever giving you a full extra day to prepare in between. That's exactly why waiting for a storm to look scary on the news before you start paying attention is the wrong strategy. By the time it looks scary, the window to calmly gather supplies, secure your home, and plan an evacuation route may already be closing. We've seen that T-story too many times. Don't wait for the storm to have a name before you pay attention. The time to pay attention is now, when the waves are stronger, when the models are starting to hint, and when the calendar is telling you the peak is here. Know your evacuation zone, have your supplies ready, check your insurance, review your family plan, talk to your neighbors about what you'll do if a watch or warning is issued. These are not scary things, these are practical things. And the fact that the season has been quiet so far actually works against people in a strange way. Quiet seasons make people complacent. They stop checking the weather, they stop thinking about it. And then a storm comes, and they're not ready. The 2026 Atlantic hurricane season has been historically quiet through August 20th. Only Arthur and Bertha, no hurricanes. El Niño doing its job of suppressing development. Saharan dust filling the tropics. Wind shear tearing apart anything that tried to organize. But the bigger waves are here now. The models are paying attention. The peak season window is open. And Dolly is waiting to be named. Watch what these waves do over the coming days. Be ready, not scared. Prepared, not panicked. And remember, it only takes one storm to change everything.